On this week's The Next Interview, you'll meet Reed Nyffeler, founder and CEO of Signal. Reed joins Dolan for a bold conversation about what leadership really looks like when you're scaling trust across 650-plus franchise locations. At the heart of this episode is one tension every executive faces. How do you empower people without losing control? As you listen to this conversation, pay attention to where trust, clarity, or accountability either show up or break down. That's exactly what the Empowerment Blueprint Toolkit helps you assess. It shows you where leadership friction is coming from and gives you a clear path forward. You can grab it in the show notes. Now let's jump in.
Welcome to the Next Interview Show podcast. I'm Dolan White, and as Liam, the announcer, mentioned when we came through that front door, I am the host of the podcast, and every podcast starts with the general first statement. The first statement is, I'm blessed to have wonderful conversations with industry leaders who are not having conversations with me today based on theory. It's because they're out there doing it, lived it, been there, tried, tested, won some, lost some. And so today my guest is Reed Nyffeler, and this is the only time I actually read, so I'm going to read your bio. So the bio at Reed is founder and CEO of Signal, one of the fastest growing security services franchise platforms in North America. And having worked around franchises, that's a lot. A lot of people don't understand the depth that goes into that. He's built Signal around a simple but powerful belief: when leaders are trusted, trusted, equipped, and held accountable, communities and business thrive. Today, Reed leads a nationwide network of franchises owners, raising the standard for safety, leadership, and empowered execution at scale. One thing I saw, Reed, when I was looking at your bio and kind of looking things up, is you built a business that's more than 650 franchises, but not just in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
You've built Australia, UK, Canada,
yeah,
other places. So just a tip of the hat for a lot of organizations build stuff in the body of the contiguous states, and there was one set of nuance. And having done international stuff for a long time, to go international, that's a job that's well done. So welcome, glad you're here.
Well, thank you, Dolan, and I know you start with gratitude. I'm thankful for you and your audience. Your audience is investing time to listen to this, and so I thank them for investing time, and I look forward to the conversation.
Cool. I think we'll have a good time. So one of the things, since the audience hasn't met you yet, what I'd like to do kind of in the beginning, which is I had a co-friend of mine teach me this sentence a couple of weeks ago, and I happen to love this sentence. So would just to introduce yourself, and tell everybody, give everybody a little bit about the path, your career, kind of what brought you into founding Signal, and take as much time as you want, as long as it's 3 minutes.
Yeah. So thank you, Dolan. And I think, really I am just your average Midwesterner here that over time has decided that I want to have an impact in the world, I think. And so then it's a matter of finding my purpose and where to have that impact. And so I think that was clear to me as I kind of progressed through junior high school. I saw, and I had a conversation with somebody even today, and they said, when did you want to know that you wanted to be a leader or entrepreneur? He said, when I worked for a bureaucratic organization and I realized I can't do this the rest of my life. So sometimes, so that was me. And I'm like, I think I lived in a lot of places where people would put me in a proverbial cage and say, you got to stay in the box. And every way I said, no, I'm building the box. And they're saying, no, you're in mine. And so I realized I'm the one building the box. And so ultimately over time, I had started building little boxes, following that analogy, right? I mean, I was leading little things and they became bigger. And then I thought, okay, I enjoy this. And I can see, more importantly, the impact that it's having in other people's lives. And so that motivated me to then say, okay, if I'm going to impact lives, who are the lives I want to impact? And then ultimately, how do I impact those lives and do so consistently? And that's where I led to franchising. Because my purpose statement is, through intuitive interaction, propel leaders over their self-imposed barriers to live out their unique purpose. So I realized that in a conversation like this, our intuition, I can see that, here's how I can impact Dolan and his audience. And then propel leaders. You're clearly a leader in your own right, leading this podcast, among other things. And how do I propel you and your audience over their self-imposed barriers? Sometimes that's geographic, sometimes that's financial, sometimes that's largely belief in self. Right. And so how do I communicate tools to do that so they can live out their purpose, right? Not my purpose. And so what was clear was that franchising is where those leaders are more likely to gravitate. They want to lead themselves, their business, and an organization. And then security is a need that we all have, regardless of where we live. And that led to where I'm at today, that a security franchise organization, we're doing that. And then, of course, underlying that is that, our model has to be different, right? And so we largely lean on security patrols and technology to be the last mile, right? So we're going to be physically there faster than anyone else, leveraging technology to know we're there. No different than what Amazon does with the product, right? The same products are available in many retail locations. We're the last mile there. So
that's really interesting. I think that we'll get into some stuff around franchises for a moment, but I think that's really interesting. I love the mission that you were talking about, which helping people can get past their self limitations. One of the things that I think leaders, there's a propensity, I guess is the word I'm looking for, in leadership, where there's a focus on the outcome. I'm moving towards this. It's a kind of a damn the torpedoes approach.
Yeah, right.
I'm going that way, regardless of whether the team's coming with me or not. And as you've built this, one of my notes, I make a couple of notes before every we get on, and you'll see me write some stuff down as we're going. But one of the things I was thinking about, Reed, was kind of the opportunities and challenges that you face, because we'll get into leadership stuff, but when you're leading people you're leading your team, your franchise organization, right? Who are helping the entrepreneurs as they build theirs. But you're leading entrepreneurs that they're not connected to you. They're not in your organization. They're there. So I'm curious about some of the challenges or things you kind of led through as you're building that structure. One of the things that I loved looking in your background is your focus on empowerment, right? And autonomy. So kind of what those lessons are kind of heading into that.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I'll start with, generally our franchisor, there's really three different groups of people, right? We have our franchisees, our customers, and the employees of our franchisees.
Sure.
And so if you look at general leadership and lead generally, you're not going to lead them as well as you lead specifically. And so I look at those different paths and I say, okay, how can I lead the franchise owners? And we'll start with that one for this audience. And by and large, a lot of them are former military and police. And the self-imposed barrier to kind of follow that, line of thinking is, they're saying that, hey, I know how to handle weapons. I know how to protect the public, but I don't know how to run a business. And so what I'll tell them, and I remember a story of an early franchisee, and I was teaching him to sell. And literally he had flown over from the Middle East and had just gotten off deployment and then came and was in training. And I said, just yesterday you were knocking on a door. Now, someone was pointing a gun at you and you were completely confident walking in there. And largely our audiences were calling upon apartment complex. And I said, now, and this guy is, he looks like he came off the Game of Thrones movie or show. He's like very intimidating. And I said, now you're concerned about a 20-something female that's going to lease you an apartment and you're scared to death. He's like, yeah. Right. I'm like, I know. And I said, that's just a matter of that. And what changed in his mind, I said, you're here to help and learn, right? Not to apprehend. And so it was a matter of the objective changed, but the skills were there. And he loved his job afterwards. He realized that because I changed my perspective, sure, I'm stepping in front of a door and maybe I'm not shooting somebody or apprehending, but I'm helping and learning from them. I'm learning from them and I'm, they're at their property and I'm going to leverage my experience to help them. And that really calmed him down. And then as a result, it just took off from there. And that was a simple mindset change, that it was saying, I am not here seeing who's going to shoot me. I'm here to help. And it was just that orientation of his mind. And then the questions changed, right? I joke with police officers, said, many times when you're asking for contact information, it's because you're going to give them a citation right afterwards. Give me your license,
sure.
Your name and number. I said, you're asking them for a proposal, okay, not a citation, and both of which may cost them something. But I think in that same time, it's just perspective, right? And you have to change your perspective. And many times that's what's missing. Not our learning, not our training, but our perspective.
Right.
And so many times when we're breaking down that self-imposed barrier, so with our franchise owners, they already hopefully have some entrepreneurial ambitions. And I need to help orient their perspective to being the leader owner. And that's where the change is. And then I think that the next piece will go to the employees, right? You feed that audience. And so in that audience, it's really about opportunity, right? Because I think they're looking at compensation. Like, what's my job? What am I required to do? and what am
Right.
I compensated to do?
Right.
Instead of saying, what's my opportunity? And I think many times as an employee, we get fixated on what we're paid and our responsibilities. Instead of saying, I always tell people this, the learning lasts your career, the payment lasts the next 2 weeks, right? I mean,
Right.
so if you go and you work for 2 weeks, you get a paycheck. However, here I am now, 30 years into my career, and I go back to some of my first job experiences and I learned those things and I realized, okay, I know what it was like to be a frontline worker. And so as I'm creating an organization, what do I want to recognize them that I wish I was recognized for? And what structure is valuable? And what should I teach them and learn that they can apply the rest of their life? So that is helping them understand it's not about a paycheck, it's about an opportunity. And the more you create value for the franchise owner or the employer, the more opportunity you're going to get,
Right.
as opposed to, and that opportunity is in form of compensation, right?
Right.
Because if you create value, you'll get paid more. And so that's really reorienting their mind to say, I'm an employee mentality versus an owner mentality. So,
Yeah.
and then of course, the third group's the customer. And with a customer, it requires all three to be a successful franchisee. You need a franchise owner, they need employees, and likewise, you need a customer that's going to pay everybody as a result. But that customer is
Sure.
saying, are you looking at this as a commodity or are you trying to solve a problem? And I always use this analogy. If we wanted to go to work, the cheapest way to do that is walk, right? We could walk 20 miles. Let's say we work 20 miles. You live in LA, so I'm sure 20 miles is just the closest convenience store, 20 minutes anyway. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I think you can walk there. That's the cheapest way to do it. But
Right.
really, if you look at the time value of money, getting in a car is obviously more advantageous.
Sure.
There's a car, and then there's varied cars. You can get a car for $5,000 that barely moves to some for $500,000, right? And so then it's a
Right.
matter of value, right? What do we value? And so if you get a customer to understand, what do I value my time. I value the way I roll into that convenience store, wherever I go, et cetera. And then they understand, okay, how do you deliver on that value? Then the price is immaterial at that point because the value is quantified. And so that's how I help them understand that it's not a commodity, it's providing value. And so that's helping them coming over their self-imposed barrier to understand what value am I getting from this vendor in this process. So those are the three different channels and leading them differently based upon their orientation or perspective, and then making sure that it all kind of weaves together.
Yeah. I love that. Love that story. So leaders, as you're listening to this podcast, you look on your phone, your device, whatever you're listening to the podcast on, and there's a little dial with a backwards arrow that rewinds. Go
Yeah.
back and listen. Go back and listen to that because I think it's an important. Love the concept you were talking about, Reed, because I think there's this philosophy or thinking in leadership. There's a genericizing of leadership. If I know how to do this, then I can lead everybody the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't get to that outcome leading everybody up from there's a tenet that there's a thread that stitches it all together, but there's a unique component that has to occur.
Yeah, let's double down on that, Dolan, because I think, if we go back and look at the most influential people in our lives,
Yeah.
it's not because they mastered a topic necessarily. It's because they related that topic to us, right? Let's
Yes.
let's use an example of a
Well
teacher.
said.
I think a teacher, they may not, or a doctor, you can go any professional that you want to, and they may be the very best. In fact, there was a study done, and these doctors, they were the best doctors, and the bedside manner was how they were graded, not necessarily their proficiency as a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
It's how they related the ailment to the particular individual and how they gave them treatment options in a relatable format instead of being exactly right on the way they related that to them. And I think that's the role of a leader, to say, who am I talking to and what are their aspirations? And then what do I draw from my experience in order to help them move forward instead of just tell them that I'm right? And I think
Right.
that's a trap that we fall into for sure.
Yeah. I love that. So when you're working with leaders in your organ and you're working with just kind of there's leaderships with those in your franchise leading their own independent business and growing their business there, and then inside of the body of your organization. I think what you're talking about from that unique perspective, Reed, of having the conversation based on who they are
Mm-hmm.
and the ability to do that. How do you um, how do you help them gain that skill? So there's an understanding that's a considerable part of their acumen as a leader is to be able to do that.
Well, there's a practical thing to do, ask questions and listen, right? And then, but there's an orientation thing you need to do first. Everyone is thinking about what they're going to say and themselves. So think about the other person. I think so many people are nervous about meetings because they're thinking about how are they going to value me. Many people are concerned, for example, are nervous about speaking.
Yeah.
And they're like, I don't want to make a mistake. It's all if they think about how can I help the audience, they immediately calm down because now when we're helping someone
Yeah.
else, we're much more relaxed. So the first thing I would say is stop thinking about yourself. And we are so inclined, and we're thinking about ourselves sometimes and many times in a negative way, saying, I'm saying the wrong things, or I didn't choose the right word, I didn't phrase that the right way.
Yeah.
Instead, saying, what is that person need help? How can I? And there's really multiple criteria we can communicate in. And the objective is to get to the fourth one. The first one is, I want them to know this about me, right? That's the first one. That's where most people are at. And ultimately, nobody ultimately cares, quite frankly, right? They don't care what you ate for lunch. They don't care where you went on vacation.
Right.
They don't care your dog, what your dog ate for breakfast and how many times you walked it that day, right? They
I
don't
love that.
care.
Yes.
Second is what you want to know about them. That's the second criteria. It's like, I wish I knew this about them. And we're doing that to evaluate them comparatively, right? That's the second thing we communicate.
Yes.
And then the third criteria is, what do you think they should know? Now we're getting to a more consultative conversation, right? It's like, I think you should know this. Next time you make your chicken, make sure you put this type of seasoning on, it'll be much better, right? That's consultative and advisory, right? And so we value those. The fourth one is transformative. And that's where I try to operate. What would transform? If there was a tip that someone heard early in your career that was, this is something you need to know, and you did that the rest of your life, that's transformative, right?
Right.
So I remember a transformative moment as an example that was communicated to me, and I was in junior high, and it's something that stuck with me my entire life, and I still do this to this day, and I'm doing this conversation.
Yeah.
I knew that active listening was way more important. I had a choice. I'm sitting in 8th grade class, and the teacher's telling me all these things, and I couldn't write the notes fast enough. But what I could do is I realized I'm going to active listen and see what would basically be on the test. I'm going to say, she said, this is going to be on the test. That was usually like cue. It's like, I'm going to really focus and pay attention to what she says next,
Yeah.
And then as opposed to writing everything she says down.
Right.
And so over time, I recognize I can disseminate what is a valuable piece of information and what is not a valuable piece of information.
Yeah.
Because I'll actively listen. And so then in this conversation, through my intuitive interaction developed over 30, 40 years, I can then listen and say, he's saying that because it's important to him. Dolan is sharing this information because it's meaningful to him. Mm-hmm. And if he's looking at this the wrong way, how can I help pivot that in another direction? And I do that as a leader. It was a developed skill because I decided active listening. And so how do we do that as leaders is, 1, we care about someone else first. 2, we ask questions. And then 3, we actively listen. And many times what they're saying is not what they're saying, right? We can say the same term as, oh, it was a great day. Was it really a great day if I say it that way? Or I had an amazing day, right? It's just how we say it. I can say great or amazing. That was an operative word, but how I said it makes a big difference. So active listening is understanding how we're communicating that and if it's authentic to who we are. And that is then how we can lead people and understand who they are and connect to them and empathize with them.
Yeah, I love that, Reed, because I think part of, to your point, one of the things with one of the important aspects of active listening is if you're really truly, and active listening is hard to master, especially as a guy, right?
Yeah.
We have the physiology. When we say we're not thinking about anything, we're in an empty room. The lights are out. There's no windows. There's no doors, right? We're not thinking about anything. We're done. Matter of fact, there's raise 5 sons. That there's a guy rule I teach them. 2 guys can sit on the couch. They can both watch a movie, not say a single word for 3 hours, and neither one of them's wondering if the other one's mad at him.
Exactly. Yeah.
We could do that. First joke I've ever told in this podcast. Anyway, there you go. We broke the ice. So it's interesting you see that, because I think one of the important things, and you nailed something I think that's really important, is the meaning. Mm-hmm. When you're really doing active listening, is coming to understand the context and the meaning. What does this really mean? And what does it mean to that person that I'm having this conversation with?
Yeah. And I think that's an important designation, really important designation, because many times we're saying, what are they saying mean to me?
Yes.
Instead, the question should be, what does it mean to them?
Yes.
Right. And so we are always listening with what they're saying mean to me? But if we're active listening, saying, what does it mean to them? Right. Because I had an opportunity to go to Iceland. And when I was in Iceland, I was meeting with this guy who was Icelandic, and it was great. He said their moms sewed them all their sweaters, which was amazing.
Yeah.
And I was asking them, I said, what's some of the things that are unique about the Icelandic culture? And they said, if something's happening and they call you, said, I need some help. And they said, you literally drop everything and you go help. That means when they say, hey, can you come help? That means they're in dire straits, right? I mean, how many times in America it's like, hey, can you help me move this next weekend? How many people would really show up, right? I mean, you just go
Right.
say that on the street, nobody's there. Whereas he said literally, it said, hey, can you come help? And they didn't even give context.
Yes.
Literally in the meaning in their culture means that it drop everything, everyone, you get all resources you can, everything you need because something really is happening. And that was insightful to me because it shows you context of the communication. He
Yes.
said it
That's
in just a
awesome.
normal voice, not freaking out, right? And we can
Right.
dramatize things and we can make it sound really, really crazy and all these other things.
Sure.
And at the same time as they didn't really need help. But over there,
Right.
they're saying it in a normalized way and like, yeah, do you mind sending a couple guys over? And that means like I'm about to
Right.
die, right? And that's
Exactly.
purely context, and
Yeah.
that's cultural context, right? And we all have our own independent culture, especially in America. There's a very diverse culture, but there's also individual context, right? I mean, I'm sure
Yeah.
if you or your wife say something, it might have different meaning, even though it might be the same thing if it's coming from one or the other, right?
Yeah. And generally after 40 years, yeah, it's usually a different meaning. And I didn't get it. No
Yeah,
matter what
exactly
happens,
right.
I didn't get the meaning. So
Yes.
another podcast, another episode. But no, it's interesting you talk about that because I want to, before we move on to anything else, I want to stay with context because one of the things that I really enjoyed reading about with the work that you've done with Signal, in particular, is building franchises out of the bounds of the United States. So when
Hmm.
you leave the U.S., whether it's Canada, Australia, UK, now context changes,
Yeah.
but it changes dramatically because now you have a different an international, and in Australia, been all over Australia, and context changes in Australia, state to state to state to state, similar to the U.S. in some ways. But so, what was that kind of like to as you began to expand internationally to grow the business? Because it's different.
Yeah, and I think I heard it described this way, and I'm going to use this as a good way to describe every culture. Every
Sure.
culture, our hardware is the same. Humans, we all have hearts and minds and aspirations and desires, but our
Mhm.
software is different. And that is our culture, right? I mean, I'll give a good example. When I went to Germany, I was with a prospective franchise owner. He said, hey, I need to kind of pause this. I said, what happened? He
Mhm.
goes, well, my dad passed away 9 years ago, but 10 years ago, I inherited the family farm. And so my sisters are suing me because there's a revocable will. I'm like, what? So for 20 years, you can sue your family members on the value of the assets that your deceased family passed along to you. And by law in Germany,
What?
you have to distribute it equally among your family. So even if there's an estranged family member, you cannot
Wow.
apportion that appropriately. I thought, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
However, that's why in America we have irrevocable wills because you
Right.
get a large contingent of these people that didn't like that. And so you have to
Yes.
understand that's a ideology or a mindset that's built around that. And he said that's why you
Yeah.
don't have a lot of small businesses there. You only have big businesses because they all have to have a job. For example, the Porsche family, the Porsche is owned by the state or the government of Germany, and they have to
Hmm.
employ every family member in a figurehead role um, for those laws that are complied. And
Sure.
so you have to
Yeah.
understand the local laws. And so what I do first is I study the culture and I go in and I say, okay, what is this fixed and flexible are two things. What is fixed? What is that hardware that's going to be everywhere? And then what is
Yeah.
this? What's flexible? What's unique? What's different? And how would our brand apply there? And some would make sense, some wouldn't. Then you look at economics, right? Our services in globally in Europe particularly are kind of like a professionalized service. So it's actually a higher bill rate by the general marketplace than the United States.
Sure.
Conversely, in Central America, it's commoditized. So you got to look at the economics and say, is it justified, even if there's a high level of interest and a lot more crime, say, in these other markets, can it be economized? And then as you look at Central America, there is not a lot of trust of government and likewise institution. So as a franchisor, it's hard for me to build a scaled business because they don't trust any leadership. That's cultural,
Right.
right? Conversely, in Europe, they do whatever the government tells them to do. I mean, guys, there's
Yeah.
damages to pay if you don't. And so
Right.
they're more institutionalized. And so it's really studying those
Yeah.
things and understanding those dynamics so that you can make the appropriate decision. Because, and as a leadership principle, even if you don't go globally, this is the way to apply that is saying, don't let our excitement for the opportunity cloud our judgment and realistic rationale because we'll make a mistake.
Wait.
The cautionary tales.
Say that again.
Don't let our enthusiasm for the opportunity cloud our judgment of the experience that's built to that level. We can be excited about going to Europe, but we can really get in a huge, big trap we can never find our way out of. And we have to use our rational judgment and intuition to make the right decision, but also not miss the opportunity.
Right. Yeah, sorry to make you stop and repeat that. But that's a critically important statement for business leaders, because and having worked with some and early in my career, been one.
Yeah.
You show up on Monday morning and you kind of go, hey, I know what we're doing. And by
let's
Friday,
break down why, because I think it's important. Our enthusiasm, and I have to gauge myself in this. My enthusiasm is what led us to get here, right? Passion's our number one core value. And so that is a secret sauce, or my special weapon. But that passion can drive me down the wrong plan too, right? I can say I'm so passionate about something that doesn't economically make sense or is a complete and utter waste of time. And so it's very few people can stop me when I'm passionate. I mean, they know that I'm effectively a bulldozer. So I have to make sure that I have my own hand on the brake at the same time.
Sure.
That I don't run people over, and I can stop that on a dime as well. And so that's, we have to be able to govern ourselves and know our strengths and our weaknesses. And I think that's a difficult thing to do. And so we don't want to take away all our enthusiasm. We want to appropriately apply our enthusiasm. And I think that's the key, is be passionate about, and clearly, and that's where purpose comes in. And that was the first book I wrote, is understand where you should apply that. It's in the scope of your purpose, right? If it's outside of the scope of your purpose, that's going to be difficult to apply that. And then in the scope of our leadership, I should be passionate. And one of the things I had an opportunity to go on a mission trip, and I was volunteering under another leader.
Sure.
I loved it because I was not the leader, because then I could be the cynical, peanut gallery person, provoking and doing so in fun. And of course, I was a diligent worker and did all the work. But I mean, I could do those comments under my breath out of all fun and not any seriousness. But it was fun, right? Because I didn't have the overarching responsibility. I just had to go do my work and eat my lunch kind of thing, And so it was great. And at the same time, not my nature is to lead, right? And so I realized we're here. So how do I adjust? And this is someone else's passion. I'll align with that as opposed to leading with mine. And so it's understanding what context we are, what role we're in, and how do we deploy our best self there.
Yeah, so good. Just so good, Reed. I love that conversation. It is fun to go places when we are not the leader.
Yeah, exactly.
And it takes every molecule not to jump in. It's kind of like, all right, I'm just gonna, but I will critique you, and I will tell you what you did wrong later.
Yeah.
So when you're, one of the things that two topics I'd like to kind of at least talk about just for a couple of minutes. And the very first is establishing trust. There's when you're to your point, right? You're in a high trust industry.
Yeah.
Right. People are trusting you to protect them. At the end of the day, they're looking to you for safety, and safety equates to health, mind well-being, all of the other kinds of things that come with it. So when you're establishing, I'm kind of curious just about, you're thinking from a leadership perspective with the mode and what you, from a mindset, how you move forward to establish trust. And then just to tee it up, because trust in my mind then automatically blends into autonomy. So then how do you, because trust is a prerequisite.
Yeah. So I think the first thing is we used to trust because of authority.
Yes.
Now we trust because of authenticity. So I think as you see a shift, trust as a result of authenticity, especially in the age of artificial intelligence. Is this authentic or not? Right? That's the first question we have. If it's authentic, we inherently trust them, right? I mean, you look at some of the most popular people on any social media or anywhere now, and they are the most authentic, right? You can inherently see who they are, and they're not contrived, right? So first, be our authentic selves to garner trust. If we make a mistake, admit it. If we have a perspective, share it, right? Because the trust is important, and that's a result and a byproduct of authenticity. One. And then we need to, the other thing, when we follow, people will follow us if they know we care about them. So empathy, right? And so authenticity, then empathy, embolden trust. And then once that trust is established, especially in an industry like I'm in, it takes a lot to break it, because it takes a long time to build it, but it takes a lot to break it. And where we'll break is when I'm inconsistent, right? And so consistency
Awesome.
is where trust is maintained, but inconsistency is where it's broken. And so many of our franchisees and people that come to our organization, they're like, "Hey, Reed, I want you to do X, Y, and Z." And I said, the benefit, you can trust me because I won't listen to you just like I don't listen to anybody else. I'm that direct. I mean, it's like if I listen to you, then you just have to worry about who's whispering me next. You can trust me. I'm going to say no to you and everyone. That's where I build my trust because I'm consistently no, right? You had 5 sons and I'm sure you said no to all 5 and that built trust, right? You trust
It did.
no.
There were some no's involved.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
right. And all 5 heard the no, and regardless of how they ganged up on you, right? And so I think that's where trust is built on consistency. And after 19 years, I'm here because I'm consistent, right? I've built the trust and I'm consistent. Because if I change the direction, if I change my answer, if I change the way that I'm governing myself every day, I would never build something of value. And I think people just undervalue the value of consistency, right? If we look throughout our time, we know that gravity is consistent, so we can not spill our coffee. We know that traffic is going to be consistent, so we plan our time in LA to get there. So those are the things we can build on, are the consistent things.
Yeah, I love that. That's so important. I love your point. So leaders, as you're listening to this, just again, rewind, go back a minute, go back 2 minutes and just listen to that statement again. But I love your comment, Rita, around be your authentic self. You got to be authentic. And it's hard. And one of the things I teach on all the time with executives I work with is not about me, is authenticity is hard to fake.
Yeah.
So it's got to smell. So it will come along, and people will know if you're not being authentic. So be authentic. But I love your point around consistency. Around be consistent. There's an old law around trust. It takes 5 to 7 interactions to create trust, and 1 interaction to break it.
That's right. Yeah, and I think that authenticity is tough because the world wants you to be what they want you to be, not who you authentically are.
Yeah.
And you have to decide that and this is where, people like you have confidence. I said, because I don't care what others think. And I can tell you, if there's a yes or a no, X number of people are going to say yes, X number of people are going to say no. You're not going to appeal to anyone or everyone. And at the same time, you're appealing to no one. And so at the same time, as I was created on purpose for a purpose, and I inherently know what that is.
Love that.
And I don't care what others believe my purpose should be. And usually it is alignment with giving them something. But ultimately, that's not what I was created for, right? And so I have confidence in who I am, and that gives me authentically, I can be who I am because I'm not concerned with what you think, right? If you don't like my answer, no problem. Just end this podcast and move on with your life, and so will I. You know what I mean?
Exactly. It's funny. So funny you mentioned that because there's with the acronym is what FOPO, fear of other people's opinions.
Yeah.
And I had an old friend, his name Bob Proctor. I don't know if you know who Bob is, but Bob was originally, he was in the Oprah Winfrey movie, The Secret, and I knew Bob for many, many, many years. And Bob was a big influence in my life. But one of the things I remember him telling me and telling in all of his events was, what other people think of you is none of your business.
That's right.
Doesn't matter.
Fixated on that.
Yeah, just leave it and let it go. So as you're and I've kept you way past what I promised today. We're going to go a few more minutes if you're okay with that.
Yeah, sure.
We'll be respectful for you. At least for this moment, I'll be respectful. The practice that active listening. So as trust is developed, one of the things I think that's really an interesting thing for you, because you're leading in 3 domains, right? You're leading customers, you're leading internal team, and you're leading entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And entrepreneurs have different perceptions of what they want to be led and how they want to do and blah, blah, blah. And all of that requires autonomy.
Right.
So how do you create that autonomy? Because trust is that framework piece at the beginning so that people can actually go get stuff done.
Yep. And I think this might be best used in a context of an analogy as a parent, right? And I think we give our children autonomy as they perform within the boundaries. So your boundaries are never best established later. They're better expanded from the beginning. So I'll give an example. Like when a child is born, they're put in a bassinet. Yeah. And if they can govern themselves in a bassinet, fine, or they get too big for it, then we put them in a crib. Then if they are comfortable in their crib and they can begin to do that, we get them into a bed. Then we keep them on one floor until they can navigate the stairs. And the boundaries expand each time they show they can navigate the stairs. then pretty soon they can stay in the yard. At some point, if they realize they look both ways, they can cross the street, their boundaries
Yes.
expand. Eventually, they can get to school because they can govern themselves outside of our visible presence, right? And so what
Yeah.
has happened is they get autonomy within those boundaries, and their boundaries expand because they've proven that they can operate within those boundaries. I
Yeah.
think many people want autonomy, but they have not yet proven they can operate within the boundaries that are defined.
That's
So, as
awesome.
a leader, our job is to expand the boundaries for those who have proven they can be autonomously operate appropriately in the boundaries they have, expand boundaries. Conversely, if they have not proven they can operate within those boundaries, teach them what it takes to operate appropriately in the boundaries, and then you'll expand them.
Right.
Because so many of us as leaders can make the mistake of saying, one person failed, so I'm going to cancel it for everybody, right? Everybody lost their opportunity because one person
Yeah.
failed. Instead, we need to say, why did they fail? And what was my job as a leader? I gave them too many boundaries, so I'm going to take those away. Or this other person does good in autonomous boundary, autonomously operating in this expanded boundary, give them more
Sure.
opportunity, expand their boundary. So I think that's how we give them autonomy, is we see how they operate in the previous boundaries, then give them more autonomy because of their performance.
I love that. So what just, and I really love that. So in my early career,
Mm-hmm.
I was an engineer by trade, grew up in the software industry, and did a lot of with data security stuff, hunting bad guys using data. And one
Mm-hmm.
of the things that we always talked about was deny all, grant on proof,
Yeah,
right? So you don't get it until you prove you need it and you can
right.
understand it. So I love that. I love that conversation. And seems similar with sons. Yeah, no, you can't drive my car to Las Vegas today, son.
That's right. Yeah, you haven't proven you're
No,
worthwhile of that.
not that didn't happen. It broke down on the way. That's a whole another
Yeah.
podcast. No, yet another podcast. But so from leading into autonomy, now when you're as you're doing this, I think one of the things with leadership, and you touched on something that's really important, Reed, which is when we see things start to go off the rails, we have a tendency to get punitive and we punish
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah.
So how do you build, I'll call it a ritual. How do you build a ritual into the process that allows you to measure where you are so you know the nature of autonomy and what's going on and where to react and where not to react?
Yeah, I think sometimes it's usually right before is the play before, right? I think sometimes we look at the
Mm,
failure, right? So
sure.
let's use a sporting analogy. So many times we're like, oh, they got to throw a touchdown, a Hail Mary pass on the fourth down in the fourth quarter.
Right.
Well, if they would have got a first down on the third down, they wouldn't have had that play, right? So what happened right before is usually what leads to that. And so we are
Yeah,
looking at
there
this
is that.
play.
Yeah, yeah.
We're looking at this play that's there, but I mean, just complete the touchdown or complete the pass on the third down, and you have a first down. You can have a new set of downs. I think that's really what we need to evaluate: is saying what led to this position I'm in now, where I have to make a decision that I don't want to make. And so I
That's
think, many times it's the lead in that we need to evaluate as leaders and say, what led to that? Where did I make this mistake? What are the predetermined factors that led me to make this mistake or this position I'm in that I can avoid next time?
yeah. That's really powerful because I think then I've been involved with leaders in other organizations that when a mistake is made, it's all about the reaction,
Right.
right? I'm going to go find a hose and I'm going to pour water on this fire
Yeah, and there's a
without,
couple areas that we make mistakes consistently. It's employment and economic, right? And so the
yeah,
first is that, bringing the wrong people into our organizations. And I think sometimes we do that out of desperation. I need someone this weekend now, right now. And so we
yes,
emotionalize it, right?
yeah,
So instead of saying, wait a minute, if I make that decision, what happens 2 weeks from now when they're the wrong culture fit, or 3 weeks from now, a year from now, when I realize they never could do the job and I've just wasted all my money on them, even though I felt like I needed somebody now. And what we realize is the emotions of the moment will subside, but the
yeah,
capability of the person will be consistent. You know what I mean? So,
sure.
so we
You,
gotta take where's reality and emotion in this on that side. And I think that's the same around finances, right? It's saying we need this right
yeah,
now. And we need to determine, is this a temporary need or a permanent need?
right,
And if the decision we're making is a permanent need, make it so that it's a permanent decision versus a temporary
sure,
need. I mean, if it's raining and I need an umbrella, whether it's $10 or $5, I'll pay the $10, right? Because
yeah,
it's $10 and I need the umbrella because I can't stop the rain. However, if it's going to rain in a week or a month or 2 years from now, I'll say, which umbrella would I really pick? You know what I mean?
right,
And I can have it ready. And so it's a matter of, and then I might buy a $50 umbrella because I'll always have it. I won't need it
right.
substantially. And so that's the issue that we need to look at too, is the permanence of the decisions we're making and whether we really need it economically. And even though we paid more, we're going to get more use out of that as opposed to a one-time use umbrella. And so we can pay more, but it's a better
Sure.
economic decision because we may use it for 20 rainstorms as opposed to one.
Yeah, I love that comment. There's a gentleman that I met through a guy named Joe Clark, and I'll give him a plug. He used to be Big Joe Clark, and he lost 100 pounds, so I can only call him
Nice.
Joe Clark now. But it's funny because similarly, I think a lot of leaders lose track of the fact that when you make that decision, this is something you're going to make a decision on for the sake of consistency.
Sure.
This is going to follow you, follow you, follow you, follow you. And he had actually created a process to memorialize that decision that got made. Who
Right.
made it? Why did you make it? And do those kinds of things. So,
And even worse, that decision will be the basis for subsequent decisions. So if you're making a
right.
decision not consistent, others will say, well, last time you did this. And it's saying, well, the 100 times before that, I didn't. They're always going to go to that. Well, this one time you made an exception, make another one. And so
Yes.
again, it goes back to that consistency we've talked about.
Yeah. It's like raising sons. Yeah. Last time you said, all right,
Yeah, exactly.
maybe it was me. So anyway, so I've kept you way beyond what I had promised to do, but I want to do maybe one more thing before we wrap up the podcast. I told you there's no elegant way out. This is just how we're going to go out. If you wouldn't mind, just for the listeners, because a lot of listeners have an entrepreneurial spirit. They think they want to do more. They have experience that probably matters for the space. Talk a little bit about Signal.
Sure.
And the business, because I'd like to have people reach out to you if they want to know more. It's going to be in the show notes. I want you to reach out to Reed or whoever's appropriate and have a conversation.
Yeah, so they can go to teamsignal.com, teamsignal.com. And we are a security franchisor. We're in 49 states, 9 countries. We continue to expand the globe, and we provide physical security services in the local market. And so, we fully finance the right franchise owners in those markets and help them grow their businesses so they can, really build their legacy if they're entrepreneurial. And there's other concepts that I'm building as well that are all under that same platform. And
Awesome.
what I do differently is I'm not asking them to come up with a whole bunch of money. I'm asking them to be willing to work on their own vision every day, all day, right? And that's the sweat equity component of that. And it's over time as well. So that's what they can look at if they want. And the other is a filter replacement business, a commercial filter replacement business that we're launching, Filter Go.
Oh, wonderful.
So those are options that they can consider and pursue in the local market, and we'll teach them how to do it. We'll help finance their efforts and ultimately get them rolling and building their businesses.
Oh, that's fantastic. And listeners, I would suggest reach out and learn. Even have the conversation, even if you end up not doing the franchise, have the conversation and learn. Part of the entrepreneurial experience is what really goes on. And until you go ask those questions, it's the power of the question. You mentioned that earlier. It's the power of the question. Until you go ask those questions, you don't know what you don't know.
That's right.
So go find out. If it's not a fit, you'll know it's not a fit. If it's a fit, it's an opportunity for you to pursue a dream, change your life, change your family's life, and contribute to contribute to a better future. So, well, on that note, I'm going to close this with some gratitude. I warned you, I'm going to do this. First and foremost, I've really enjoyed the conversation and really enjoyed your insights and your response to the query form, which I can talk about all things leadership, understated the value of this conversation. So I'm grateful for you and thank you for coming and hanging out. You could be doing a lot of other stuff, and instead you hung out with me and my listeners. So appreciate you, sir, and grateful for you being here.
Well, Dolan, thank you for having me, and thank you for investing in retirement into the next generation. I think that's important. That's a responsibility that all of us have, and hopefully your listeners too. They recognize that, hey, it's not just about us. It's about us learning so that we can invest in the next generation. And I think you're a shining example of that.
Thank you.
That you are, fulfilling that by starting this podcast and sharing it with listeners. And hopefully that audience can continue to apply the learnings they're getting from you in all these episodes. So thank you for having me, and I've enjoyed the conversation.
Cool. They're good. All right, listeners. We do this at the end of every podcast. I'm going to add a new thing to it. And one of the things that we do is I would like you to do exactly what Reed was talking about. We listen to there's a lot of podcasts out there. There's a lot of really cool ideas. Listeners, I'm going to encourage you to do one thing. Take what you heard in the podcast and apply it to action. Move the podcast from entertainment to action. Go try something. Send me an email. I'll forward it to Reed. If there's something that came out of it that you learned from Reed and you want him to know, I'll make sure he knows you learned it from you. The second thing is give the podcast a know, like, share, or follow. It has nothing to do with vanity numbers. It has to do with the fact that in order for the podcast to be seen, it has to be elevated. It's just how the algorithm works, and it's different on every platform. The reason why it needs to be elevated is to empower 1 million leaders. So if you know a leader who could learn something from what you heard today, from what Reed talked about, share this podcast with them. Just send them a note, send them a link and say, hey, go check out this podcast. Listen to minute number 12, where this old white-haired guy was talking about blah, blah, blah. So share that with the listeners. And on that note, I want to thank everybody for listening to the podcast. Reed, again, thank you for being here. I'm Dolan White. I'm the host of the Next Interview Show podcast. See you next Tuesday.
Thanks for listening to this week's The Next Interview Show podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and then take time to turn what you heard here into action.